what happens when you have an ex-entrepreneur, an ex-journalist, and an ex-consultant come together for a few drinks and fries. Well, you have great conversations where everyone takes home something with them. Welcome to Friends, Drinks, and Fries, an unfiltered conversation about nearly all things under the sun. Welcoming you is Harish, Sumit, and me, Rohit. Join us for a fascinating conversation that enlightens others while it enlightens us. So, welcome to our listeners. I know there are people who are demanding us to come on camera, but we are such horrible-looking people that we can't afford to. Anyhow, someday we might. But if we generate the critical mass on the audio base, so fingers crossed on that one. And now, dear audience, it's your prerogative that you generate the critical mass if you want to see us online.
Exactly.
Yeah. But
Don't do an Arjun Kapoor thing that we will boycott you.
These guys really, I mean, we discussed a lot of Bollywood last episode, but this Arjun Kapoor thing reminds me, these guys live under a rock. They have no idea. And today there's another comment. Apparently, Kareena Kapoor said that her role in Jab We Met increased Indian Railways passengership. That's what she said. Indian Railway made a lot of money because more people started traveling after her movie. Imagine that, having such gross
inflated opinions about yourself.
No, the person handling the Ministry of Power handle should come and handle Ministry of Railway and take Kareena down.
Yeah, so yeah, very nice segue, Harish. We were coming to that. That was our first topic. So storm, sort of a storm in a teacup, really, because it's not the whole mainstream. I wouldn't call not mainstream, but if political journalists are in the midst of a storm or having a tip off with the government, then it gets played out a lot more. Here it is the financial journalist, very small section of financial journalists who cover power sector, who got just so for viewers who don't know, who one of those journalists wrote something about coal imports, which was supposedly not only incorrect on facts but also on interpretation, as I was told by somebody who has been following it more closely than I have. And Power Ministry in its tweets not only corrected the journalist but made certain comments that were not taken very kindly. Now,
no, but you have to give it to the Power Ministry. We had, I mean, they were ballooning up the shortage of coal for past 2 months. I mean, they put Ministry of Power on the back foot for a long time. I mean, they were pumping so much coal. They had to generate so much coal being sent across the state or across the country, so much that it became overpowering for the news readers. हाँ पता है coal चल रहा है. We know we are sending it by railway. We are importing more. So I think it was a breaking point. I mean, they finally had enough.
And I mean, since Sumit and I have covered, I mean, I have seen the power space for a while in different roles. We sort of know what goes on in the name of coal shortage, really, right?
True.
It's not like coal shortage hai. It's a mix of factors that really is I mean, the outcome is a coal shortage, but it is not because all of a sudden somebody decided to stop mining or somebody decided ki meko coal, it's a lot of things. Power plants don't have the money to buy it. स्टोरेज यार्ड्स नहीं होते हैं थर्मल पावर स्टेशंस में इंडिया में, तो वहां पे गीले कोल का वो क्या अचार डालेंगे.
रेक्स कम होते हैं
मानसून
रेलवे के पास कई बार.
तो अच्छा, विंटर्स में वैसे भी इंडिया में पावर डिमांड फॉल्स डाउन क्वाइट सिग्निफिकेंटली.
एग्जैक्टली. सो
राइट, तो फिर वो कोल को रखेंगे कहां?
नहीं. सो एग्जैक्टली, तो दिस वाज कोल तो एक इशू है ही. एंड जस्ट ऑन दैट, एक ईटी की जर्नलिस्ट है, काफी सीनियर जर्नलिस्ट है. मैंने भी मतलब व्हेन आई कवर्ड दिस सेक्टर, शी वाज अ कलीग ऑफ माइन, as a peer of mine, not a colleague, not in the same organization. Sarita C. Singh is her name, and I remember 2 months ago, April May में monsoon के time पे जब ये सारा हो रहा था कि we'll plumb into darkness and we'll have load sheddings, कोल का हालत बहुत खराब है. She had put out a very thoughtfully compiled thread of tweets, tackling all sorts of angles without being completely sensationalist, as you would expect a newspaper reporter to be. And and it was all in the thread. I'm sure in that Twitter thread, I'm sure she probably put out a story also in her paper, which I did not read. But thread was very what you would call balanced and full of perspective. Now, this what happened yesterday is not just about bad reporting and bad interpretation, playing with facts, but how the power ministry replied to the journalists in one of in one of the first tweets that it said it very derogatory. I mean, obviously, it will seem insulting to the journalist that this journalist who supposedly covers energy ministry, and she's been covering it for 7-8 years, so she is sort of a senior in that, maybe not age wise, but she is senior in that sector at least. Now, a lot of the journalists who are part of this power group, a WhatsApp group where ministry people are also there, ministry communication people, PIB people who are there, took offense to that. Twitter pay, a lot of people took offense to that. My of course, we all have different views, and the journalists who are currently working, some of the views that we heard were all sort of on similar lines. I did not hear anything that was contrary to what was being said. It was that, okay, put out the facts, but don't do these insulting things that the journalist who is supposed to be a correspondent for this beat, these kind of things make it personalized. My own take is that if, as a journalist, if a story breaks, you will blame the minister, the secretary, the whoever not of the ministry, and it is considered kosher.
Yeah,
Fair enough. They are public servants, and they're answerable to you. And as a journalist, as a reporter, you're supposed to, if you come across something, some information that puts them on the dock, you're supposed to go the whole hog. No punches pulled. But why does the same treatment then have a face such a blowback from you guys? If I'm a journalist and I did something wrong, I would expect the consequences in full. So that behavior, that kind of defensive behavior, oh, this kind of language is not suitable from power ministry. Why is it not suitable? I do not understand it. So as we discussed it, they all seem like a bunch of snowflakes who were trying to defend something. While and it's not that the ministry's tweets were all about physical personal attack. They had the entire story right there in the thread, that these are the things you got them wrong, and you got them wrong in the interpretation aspect of this also. And we have seen it, as Harish just pointed out, that we had the stories of coal shortage, and because government is not doing something, Coal India not doing something, shortage ho rahi hai, they're not exploring all the different angles that Sarita did in her thread tweet. Or एक महीने पूरी ये story चली, stories are gone, the supposed blackout never happens. Who is taking responsibility for that? Nobody. Are they losing their jobs? Are they getting censured by their editors? Are they getting censured by the people who are reading them? Probably, but I mean, there's no knowing what happens. So they will. Journalism में ये हमेशा से, at least personally मुझे लगा है कि there is a lack of skin in the game. You can pretty much put out anything without much of a consequence, and that is something that actually harms the industry, harms the proper due diligence that you're supposed to do, which where you are trigger happy, you put out something on Twitter, it's an attraction for any
journalism is either on facts or your extrapolation, not on your feelings. So you're the fourth estate. I mean, if the fourth estate does not take accountability, you will have an Arvind Kejriwal on first page of New York Times, in which there is Delhi being a UT is the best education model in entire India, and they visited only one school in Delhi. Either somebody has to take accountability for all this nonsense. Okay, you want to promote yourself or your ideology, good, do it in your personal space. Don't piggyback on the journalism tag, and then when somebody responds in kind with facts and they interpret, put a tag on your intelligence, don't cry foul. I mean, the tag on your intelligence is your reporting. Simple.
This reminds me of a very interesting case that, so there's this portal, I'm not going to name it, from a news portal that runs that basically covers southern states of India. that was started by a
Well,
very famous, how do you say, defense scam breaker journalist, so to
yeah.
speak.
Hmm.
Now, the main face of it today, the Coriander lady, for a want of better terminology, she's often been found reporting absolute nonsense and half truths. Right now, if you should have seen her reaction on what happened with respect to this particular journalist being tagged by the power ministry. And I mean, a lot of people basically put really, gave it to her after that. And this is unfortunately or fortunately not just her case. I just mentioned it because her portal is a habitual liar on many fronts. But it's the case with a lot of newspaper journalists, which tells you that there is an absolute lack of trust today. And this was not like a left or right issue, mind you. A lot of left-leaning people also just gave it back to the journalist there itself. A lot of them were like, I don't support the government, I don't support the ministry, but I'm very happy this happened. So when you see that happening, you realize that there is a genuine, paucity of trust that the fourth estate has basically generated for itself. Now, if you can criticize the three estates, why can't you criticize the fourth estate? And I completely agree with Harish for that.
Absolutely.
And Harish, you have also, since you are more multilingual than I would say some of us here, you've also seen other language medias, at least visually or, verbally or audio wise. And from what you've always told me, there's been a lot of misreporting even in other languages necessarily.
Oh.
But the thing is that unfortunately or fortunately, those people never get called out so far.
The thing is that the number of Lok Sabha seats is not that high that they need to get called out. That is the main issue. The main issue is the number of Lok Sabha seats. That's it. Assembly seats zyada ho jayega, so you think any big party will leave them? In Kerala, Rahul Gandhi is going to be PM. In Tamil Nadu, Stalin is the next PM. Andhra, Telangana, so
Jagan
PM
Mohan.
Modi, PM Modi is just on rent. That's it. He's just a placeholder. Only just because the Hindi belt has a wider audience also, because in the Hindi belt has, there are people who consume news more in Hindi than in regional language, because these regional languages are set to a particular state, unlike Hindi, which is spread more commonly. I mean, when even English news dailies don't make an impact. I mean, for us it does, because we speak English, we consume English, but that forms only 9% of India's circulation. 9%. Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, then Malayalam, then Tamil. These are the dailies which makes or breaks government. So news, if you go, it's like climate. Depending on the region, the news changes.
And have you noticed how Annamalai is so unpopular with the Tamil language media for these very reasons?
Annamalai is not famous in news, but he is famous on YouTube. Yeah. Because there are these independent podcasters or new age journalists who asks him, he asks, what do you think of the beef ban? What do you think of Modi's bad policies, foreign policies? He has an answer. That is why people stop watching TV and is more on YouTube. So he is also okay with it. His press conferences are very, engineering style, question number 1, here's the question, equal to answer, are you satisfied? No. Yes. No, this is how his press conference goes.
I am just wondering how lame those press conferences are then.
So his is, even the guy asking the question gets the answer, and he does not have time to think, spin it around, because he's come with an ideology that this fellow is BJP, RSS, Hindutva. That's it. More than that, even if Annamalai gives him numbers, every time Annamalai does this, he gives numbers. Ye lo, 10 crore, 1000 crore, pakad lo, kya karoge? And then you have if you go to, if you search Tamil Nadu's latest finance minister, he did a debate. He is trending. Apparently he had a wonderful debate on one of the Tamil news channels. So people asked who was opposite him. Then he's like the journalist. No, debate mein kaun tha? No, there's nobody. He went on the
debated
rant.
with himself and won it.
So this
नहीं,
is
you're right. So media क्या जैसे ये episode था of Power Ministry sort of showing the mirror to a journalist. What media usually hides behind is that we are it is this the new woke term that it is punching down. Government is all powerful. It is punching down on media or reporters, which it should not be. Now, none of us believe that media is any less powerful than a government. Media is immensely powerful, equally corrupt, if not more than than any other section or any other pillar of our democracy. I'm pretty. Go back to paid news, which were done without actually putting the label of editorial, which came later, or the wheelings and dealings of various journalists that happen, all the moral and ethical gray areas that these journalists explore. I mean, it's littered with such examples. All the famous journalists, the asset creation of known sources of income. Many of the current presiding deities of journalists are into that fold.
National Herald is in case.
Exactly.
And half of the FIR in AAP's CBI raid is media also.
Yeah. True, absolutely.
Another thing that since you mentioned this thing, advertorial, this is a very big problem that I see, honestly, because it is packaged in such a way that you cannot distinguish whether it is news or an advertisement half of the time.
NYT has done it with Delhi governments. They collaborated on it. It does.
I am just wondering how much money did the Delhi government spend in that?
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about the money. I'm thinking there is a leak within the government which gave signals to the AAP party to fund the NYT news. I mean, you look at the timing of the news and timing of the raid. There is a leak. And speaking of leaks, demonetization, only very few people were able to escape the effects of demonetization. And now there is a study, I think you shared the study.
So I got access to the study very recently. Proper peer-reviewed research on the impacts of demonetization. And guess what? People's incomes actually increased in the poorest districts of India post demonetization. So all the hype about people standing in queues, people crying for money, blah, blah, etc., etc., etc. After 5 years, kya hua?
And government is not pushing this. This is where I'm getting angry. You have peer-reviewed journals. The government should, at least somebody from the minister.
And and you know what, Harish, this is not the only paper that says it. Trust me. I have seen at least 3 mainstream, really eminent economists of macroeconomic policy generally talking about this. So I'm not talking about Krishnamurthy Subramaniam. I'm talking about other people doing this.
Is that a correlation, or did the GDP also? Are there other factors that could explain why the income,
So the thing is that what this paper essentially pointed out was that there was a redistributive effect that took place. Now, for those who don't get redistributive effect, basically it is a kind of unintentional money transfer
from the rich to the poor
taking place within the same ecosystem. And we know for a fact that it happened, right? A very good example, anecdotally, that turned up in those days itself was the Cha Bagan workers across East and Northeast India, who used to be given wages in cash less than the minimum wages, all of a sudden started getting wages in their bank accounts at the fixed rate. So when you see that,
even they were given cash to convert it in the banks. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
And they were given 10%, 5%, jo bhi hai, if you was
and many stories were about how these Jan-Dhan accounts suddenly saw large deposits which were unexplained. Now, obviously maybe some of these were employees in a certain small business owner who decided to put his ill-gotten money into the accounts of various employees. Whether they got it out somehow or not, or whether some of that got left behind, that could have resulted in a redistributive effect. So we have anecdotes, and now we have these papers. But for
And even
Yeah.
I think you had pointed it out to me someday, Sumit, that
Yeah.
even the EPF numbers
Yeah.
and the health
More than
insurance
EPF,
numbers, EPFO numbers, and
income-
ESIC numbers, they
Yeah.
saw huge bumps after
Yeah.
the aftermath of demonetization.
And more than that, there was a huge bump, like 32% of more people filed income tax returns the next year to demonetization.
So see, what was the purpose of demonetization? I think, Sumit, you would agree there was never a clear definition necessarily around
There
it, right?
wasn't,
Let's
yeah.
be honest on that.
Hmm.
But I think you have said this before as well. There were a lot of secondary and tertiary benefits that
Yeah.
have arisen that we should be really, impressed by, if not necessarily agree with.
One criticism was that it destroyed a lot of these MSMEs. Again, there is, which was an opposition's sort of charge, that what you did completely sucked the wind out of a lot of businesses that are traditionally, that struggle with cash flow and all that stuff. उसके पास भी हमारे पास मतलब concrete evidence नहीं है that happened. Until before these redistributed theories or peer papers came in, we did not have anything concrete on the other side either. कि करप्शन क्या हुआ तो उसका भी कोई पक्का पता नहीं है, गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से डेटा नहीं है कि you caught how many people with who deposited, who were declaring sort of income that was not even in the income tax bracket. They didn't have to pay income tax, but suddenly deposit vast amount of money in their bank account. However, some of the clear cut advantages were this, that lot more people came into the income tax net. Lot more people started filing income tax regularly, but now and it was, I think it was I don't know who it was. Was it Jagdish Bhagwati or one of the economists? I'm not quite sure who it was, but his point was that it is such a momentous change that a lot of the effects, benefits as well as cost will become apparent only in years to come. Maybe now we have reached that point where it has been enough time where when we see something or the other happen, we can now connect it directly to demonetization. So these papers and their conclusions, I mean, I don't know how people will take it, but point to it.
Our RBI, everyone is busy doing some nonsense. RBI in the recent time, I think yesterday, they put out a news piece saying that government's push for nationalization of banks is bad. News piece in the morning. By evening 3 or 4, the RBI puts out a statement saying that no.
It's author's personal opinion.
So they are not promoting the right things. I mean, you have for positive news on one end, they are busy promoting all this bad news, and our
वो जो सोशलिस्ट कीड़ा है ना हमारे यहाँ से कभी अभी तक
जाता नहीं
है और पता नहीं कब जाएगा. रोहित has said this many times. तो मतलब सरकार बैंक चला रही है तो चलाने दो यार, उसको बेचोगे तो ये पंगा हो जाएगा, वो पंगा हो जाएगा. So that confidence that मतलब these banks, if you privatize them, they'll run properly. Opportunity cost जो देखा है लोगों ने कि भाई तुमको जो फायदा कर रही है बैंक्स, उसको मत देखो, उसको देखो कि बैंक को सरकार चलाने से कितना घाटा हो रहा है, नुकसान क्या है. That is the cost that you are paying for even NTPC, for example. It is earning profit, PGCIL is earning profit, but just because a state-owned company is profitable does not mean that it is not sitting on tons of other potential, unlocking the multiplicity of incomes and opportunities and technology. So people tend to think it in those terms, and it is because of that socialist kida that we have, even in this generation we have.
And I mean, it brings me to 3 points. One, then when you talk about PGCIL as a profitable company, for instance, right? Now think of it this way. When Sterlite entered the transmission business in India, PGCIL lost nearly all the tenders. in the first couple of years.
Yeah.
And then there was a deliberate mandate created to sort of necessarily give tenders to PGCIL to keep it afloat. That tells you at what cost that profit of PGCIL has come essentially.
Arey,
The project cost is expensive.
I remember I've done a lot of stories on that. Just to interrupt you. So they
Yeah.
had this clause where if any transmission project can be classified as in national interest, that means only PGCIL can execute it. It will go to that. Even if the private player, Sterlite was one of the biggest at that time, probably it still is as a private player. Even if it is bid lower than that, no, it wouldn't even go to tender process. It'll state okay that execution will go to.
I kid you not, and this is not like a Sterlite fanboy moment. So please, listeners, don't take it otherwise.
No, we are essentially.
Trust me, they have really radicalized the way transmission infrastructure is set up in India. आज तक इंडिया में किसी ने हेलीकॉप्टर से लैंडिंग नहीं कराई थी इक्विपमेंट की, वो उसको और वो पिलर सेटिंग कराई थी जो होती है TND, वो जो केबल के लिए जो पिलर्स होते हैं उसकी. They did it in Kiran, यार, one of the most difficult places in India, because they had expertise from South Africa to do it. What I'm trying to say is that PGCIL का बचाने के चक्कर में we are basically losing out on innovation in this.
Exactly, absolutely.
No, but there is a good move also. I mean, if you look at the way BSNL is treated right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the way government bodies should be treated. We announced 100 crores for BSNL. BSNL was all laughing for the next 10 years. ले लो.
BSNL का करने का reason ना is very different from PGCIL को संभालने का reason, if you ask.
No. I'm saying at least there is that thought process that at least they let Air India go off the shackles. कर लो, उड़ लो मेरे बेटे.
Yeah.
And
true.
they paid off their dues also. I mean, I think one good chunk of dues Air India already paid off to the Indian government.
In fact,
still I'm not bored with the whole BSNL decision. I don't think that's a right decision. It should have been.
I know, and I can also probably explain to you where it comes from.
It's
of
all
not
about
letting
licensing.
BSNL go.
Yeah.
जो मेरी understanding है, it has they consider it as a matter of national security because a lot of your government officials, especially in sensitive areas, are mandatorily kept on BSNL.
Yeah.
So that's one thing they believe that can be controlled. Though honestly, can it really be controlled is a question. मतलब जो philosophical level पे भी और security level पे बहुत उठता है. But this is one philosophy that drives them about BSNL. Anyway, so coming back to the point, since we mentioned demonetization, do you remember the coverage of the media around demonetization? क्यों में खड़े हैं, रो रहे हैं,
every death that happened during those 2 months was correlated to demonetization. लोग घर पे बैठे हार्ट अटैक से मर गए, अरे demonetization की वजह से ये बंदा मर गया. Somebody died of heat stroke somewhere, लो ये demonetization की वजह से मर गया. So that is the kind of media is essentially, मतलब not just our media, globally.
Yeah. You know what's the funny bit? The funny bit is जब when YS Rajshekhar Reddy died, इसी तरह की नौटंकी तब भी रिपोर्ट होती थी. Then the same media guys used to show like talk about it with heaps of skepticism. Right? कि वो उसकी न्यूज के शौक से, उसकी डेथ की न्यूज सुन के शौक से बंदा मर गया. That kind of उदारपू यात्रा फिर जगन मोहन ने तब निकाली थी. उदारपू means सांत्वना basically in Telugu. So anyway, point is that यार लाइन में तो लोग रॉक कॉन्सर्ट के लिए भी खड़े होते हैं. I'm not trying to belittle anybody's pain. My problem is लाइन में उसके लिए होते हैं.
IKEA, Starbucks, why rock concert?
No, and मैं तो ये इतना भी कंसीड करने के लिए तैयार हूँ, या हम लोग कर सकते हैं कि भाई 130 बिलियन मतलब 130 करोड़ की कंट्री में लाइन में 2-4 लोग मरे होंगे, no doubt about that, and ATM की लाइन में मरे होंगे. But what happens is that you start a frenzy where everything that gets reported is along the same lines. Probably the editors are demanding those stories. The reporters think that, oh, these are the stories that are getting play. कहीं कोई मरा है, उसको tenuous link से भी उसको वो कर दो कि demonetization से मरा है. So that is the kind of irresponsible behavior of the media, which goes unchecked, and there's no skin in the game. And to introduce the skin in the game, I think the the Ministry of Power, the way they've tweeted, it does not bother the journalist in her career. It does not deduct her, salary or in any form. It at least in sort of in a way just puts shines a limelight on her कि भाई तुमने गलती की है. At least that could be a deterrent in this fast moving world where information is put out without verification. If journalists aren't doing it, how are you expecting other people to do it? So that is
and the worst part is, आपने बहुत सही बोला, journalists are doing this, just one polite tick off is making them go in a frenzy. ये लोग जो a lot of them you and I know are left leaning in nature. जिनको golden days याद आते हैं हर चीज के, उन golden days में जब लोग लाइनों में धक्के खा के अपने घर के लिए अनाज और शक्कर लेते थे, वो इनको याद नहीं आता.
इनको याद वही आता है. As you said, no, ये मतलब ideologically इतने blind हैं. They have probably a lot of them. मतलब there was a lot of people have anecdotes about it. कि if you most of these journalists, if you trace their antecedents, they are either part of the student wing of Communist Party from JNU or from Kerala or from West Bengal, Jadavpur University, ISA members. So they have those antecedents, and इनको ये देखना ही नहीं है कि although supposedly left है, which means for the poor, for the working classes, but working classes का अगर लॉट सुधर रहा है तो उससे उनको कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, because ideologically they are against any perceivably Hindu government.
Exactly.
TIF came out with a report saying that boycotting movies is Hindutva.
Why wouldn't they? Anything that goes that they don't like is Hindutva. Anything that they can.
अच्छा, हम मूवीज के लिए लाइन नहीं बनवा रहे हैं लोगों की. अब तो जाके आराम से देख सकता है कोई भी घुस के. तो अब लोगों का दर्द हम कम कर रहे हैं, ये नहीं दिखता किसी.
बात वही है कि जब आइडियोलॉजिकली इतने ब्लाइंड लोग, और मेरे ख्याल से जर्नलिज्म का ये कर्ज जो है, it's not restricted to India, it is world over. NYT be so ideologically blind that for as bad as Trump was, you can clearly see Trump or Biden ka Washington Post या NY Times, Trump or Biden के similar gaffes and other stuff that is treated with almost reverence, almost kid gloves in NYT and Washington Post now, and even the normal sort of very sensible policies or sensible stuff that Trump would say in his own way about not going into war, about Germany losing or being dependent on Russia. All of those would be reported as if he said something catastrophic. He's the stupidest person in the world. So you can see how the leanings color the news in the most blatant of ways. And because it is happening, it requires a pushback from whichever side is affected by it. Government, ठीक है, normal public, ठीक है, pushback जरूरत है ताकि media should have some skin in the game. Otherwise, it gets off with murder without any consequence, essentially.
And speaking of murder, Harish, just think of it this way: Donetsk में a genocide has taken place.
Okay.
Right? In Bucha, I think it's called Bucha or what, the city. And it was done by the neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian armed forces. Where is the coverage for that?
Ukraine armed forces, you can see the kind of coverage. The president is president recently, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, somebody put out a statement saying that India buying oil from Russia is covered in Ukrainian blood. I'm like, yeah, come on. You are posing for Vogue. You have time to pose for Vogue. Your wife is partying. Your America is sending you aid in spite of them having in a recession. 2 negative quarters, not a recession, but still they have money to fund you. They are funding you the war. And what is wrong? What has India done to you? Yeah, it was your war. You did not ask our permission. You tell your friend Russia to just talk with us. ऐसा कुछ नहीं. We want to join NATO. America is supporting us. We are going for war. India का क्या लेना देना? Everyone wants to involve India in this.
Exactly.
And it's how the media would report it, as if they're taking their side, as if they're without any question. Even Indian media gives space to Chinese diplomats on any question. अबे क्यों भाई? Does the Indian diplomat in Beijing get any space in Chinese newspaper? Why is there no reciprocity? Right? Exactly. You were talking about negative growth in 2 quarters. Biden in one of the press conferences said that apparently the inflation number, CPI numbers had come in, and it was the same 8.45% as the last month. What did
Wow.
he say? He said the inflation is zero. He did not say, I mean, the rate of increase hadn't grown, but obviously it had grown by the same as 8.45% over what it was last month. And there was no, imagine Trump had saying this, imagine Biden saying this, and imagine what media would have done with Trump and what it did with Biden. So I mean, it is that color, that leaning that was always there in media because of social media, because we see everything now fairly transparently, we understand that. But understanding is one part of it, pushing back and blow back is the second part of getting media to at least be held accountable to their complete shit show all over the world, which is happening. And when it's happening, तो उनको पहले ये सब नहीं होता था, तो अब दर्द होता है कि अरे मुझे कैसे बोल दिया. We are like the दूध के धुले लोग जो कि सिर्फ truth, speaking truth to power
Bro,
करते हैं.
Bella Hadid, the
Yeah.
supermodel, she recently, in support, in her growing ideology, this thing, she said that, I wish I grew up in an Islamic household.
Hey, Bhagwan.
We wouldn't have known that she existed had she grown in an Islamic household.
Her father is an Arab real estate.
Her
mom was a Dutch supermodel. Yeah.
So she's telling that she's feeling bad for the she has been feeling bad for Palestinians for long, because they put the rocket on Israel, and Israel is like, take your rocket back. Are isne mara. It's like that small brother telling, I hit you only this much, you hit me this much.
But Bella Hadid might be smart. Saying all this kind of liberal woke bullshit will actually get a lot of work in Hollywood, which is completely cesspool of liberalism, pseudo liberalism, so to speak, and wokeism.
Hollywood, just like the Indian film industry, is splitting. There is this new age films which are coming, which are totally what do you say?
Rubbish.
They don't care. They don't care what you think. This is a story. If you want, you watch it. Else not. And main Hollywood is like, we are snowflakes. We have a She-Hulk. She's got a job. She is of ethnicity. More than the role, it is more about her ethnicity, what her father did, whether she's colored.
Ultimate तो ये होता है जब शेक्सपियरियन ड्रामास में white characters are played by black people.
No, that still
I'm sorry, I may sound racist, but for heaven's sake, those people are upper class people in England in most plays, if you've read them, right?
Shahrukh Khan ka wo,
except for one play where he specifically mentioned Shakespeare, that the hero is of Moor descent, which was Othello. Have you ever heard him specifically point out that the hero was, or heroine, or any character was black?
True, but उसको चलो adaptation करके हम यहाँ पे
नहीं, I'm just saying वो ये फालतूगिरी मतलब time period के हिसाब से भी बनाएंगे accurate करने की कोशिश में, but फिर भी वो उसमें भी वो घुसेड़ ही देंगे यार.
उससे भी स्टेप आगे क्या जा रहे हैं कि अगर कोई transvestite का रोल है तो it should only be played by a transvestite. A gay guy should only play a gay character. So there was a great monologue by Bill Maher on I think last week कि भाई if that is so, then can transvestites only play transvestites and not straight men? Wouldn't that limit their scope in the industry? Wouldn't that be detrimental to them? If you're saying that only gay guys can play gay characters and gay characters are few, then gay actors or actresses are limited by their opportunity.
That case, they basically cancelled Philip Seymour Hoffman, right?
Yeah.
He played Truman Capote in a. It's a difficult movie to watch, but his portrayal of Truman Capote, who was a gay man, by the way, a very famous American writer and journalist, who also wrote the story for Breakfast at Tiffany's, by the way.
Okay.
The movie that put Audrey Hepburn in like absolute diva zone. So if you think of it that way, then that and he was given an Academy Award for that role.
Okay.
So you basically cancel such performances which break the mold and dare to portray people in the first place. It's not an easy thing to be doing. कल को हिंदी movies में ये तमाशा शुरू करते हैं, then Manoj Bajpayee's portrayal in Aligarh is all wrong for them.
Yeah. And
Right.
then people
Or
will have
Madhuri Dixit and
public.
Huma Qureshi playing lesbians in Dead Ishq is a problem for them.
Yeah, and then you would require actors to come out of the closet and publicly admit that they're gay to be able to play gay characters. If you start doing this, right, then you are breaching their privacy. So this woke thing is just matlab uncontrolled stone just rolling from the mountain and
That's what
crushing everything.
that's what I said. No,
But
our rock stars died because of overdose or somebody murdered them in the shootout. These days, these days they're taking rest for mental health, improving their mental health, or for world peace,
अरे यार
singing
वो
for
किसी
world
ने
and BTS.
yeah somebody shared a very wonderful meme about in cricketers then and now Indian cricketers. Basically, it was
The
a
broken
reference to
jaw, no?
Anil Kumble and Virat Kohli.
The broken jaw one, no?
Yeah, I will bowl despite my broken jaw. Then now I feel lonely even amongst 35 people. Which is not to downplay anybody's
yeah,
mental health,
exactly. Yeah,
guys,
but
but it's just
No,
some
sometimes
of
it's
this is
taken
just
to such
bizarre.
absurd lengths that that
Exactly.
you instinctively know कि भाई इतना तो नहीं हो सकता. I mean, I understand you have a problem. I understand people have problem.
Yeah,
Mental health
exactly.
is a serious issue. But I also understand instinctively when you're taking advantage of that empathy and sympathy and taking it way too far.
Exactly.
Serena Williams, she has lived a better life than most women on earth. I'm
True.
saying on earth. And she's complaining that if I were a man, I wouldn't retire. अरे नहीं खेल सकती तो मैं हम क्या करें? We are for you. You want to play? You
That
you
the
cannot.
Williams sister have done this gender victimhood card for a very long time. ये आज की बात नहीं है.
Yeah.
Honestly. But this again comes back to the point of how the media is more than willing to fall over each other to report this kind of nonsense in the first place and not call out bullshit.
I wonder if media falls over. Sometimes they are the instigator, the originator of these things. Media is an active sort of player in creating these propaganda. अब किस हमारे यहाँ देख लीजिए, let's go back to Kejriwal. Which state chief minister gets as much media coverage? And state to मैं मतलब Delhi is not even a full state, by the way. Which state chief minister? And there are so many high performing ones. There are so many other critical states where so much of
development.
So much development, so much of people coming out of poverty. हर तरह की चीज हो रही है, मतलब interesting as well as bad. But the amount of propaganda behind Arvind Kejriwal and his so-called propaganda ही है, शैम्पू साबुन बेचने वाला सीन है पूरा. स्कूल में ऐसा कर दिया, वैसा कर दिया. Some of the data says that all his claims are dubious.
You know what was the funny bit in those propaganda bits? There was one picture which was of a private school in Delhi.
In the New York Times pictures, one of the pictures. Imagine that. Now, what do public, मतलब जो public इनको trust करती है, I don't think many public, मतलब many people actually have that kind of trust in media. हाँ, they पढ़ते हैं, report करते हैं, पर ऐसा नहीं कि उसको आत्मसात कर लेते हैं. उन्होंने बोला वो सही बोला, but over a period of time, if you're bombarded by this with the same thing over and over again, you tend to somewhere start believing it. कि हाँ होगा ऐसा यार, लोग रोज बोल रहे हैं, साल से
it's like this ना, कुछ तो होगा.
Even if you want to resist it, it tends to breach that wall of resistance sometimes.
In fact, that's how I would say this, and I'm not trying to dissuade anybody, but you know, this whole Bimaru state वाला जो नौटंकी शुरू हुआ था back in the 80s, it started off because of one paper in EPW, Economic and Political Weekly, but it went in all the wrong directions essentially after that. Because what the paper intended to say and what the media made out of it were two different things.
But how
mind
do you check? You have to. I mean, it's like previously journalists. The whole point of journalism, I mean, as a profession, I mean, if you just take a bricklayer lays bricks, a journalist reports facts, a reader reads. So if I'm paying for a newspaper or a newspaper subscription or a online subscription, it is not my job as a reader to go to another news portal and check whether this is what is written is right, or should I go and check on Twitter or Facebook or do a YouTube review or reaction to the news to see. So the onus is put on the reader to check what is right, or to see what to make what is
I get
facts.
that. I mean, I think it is one of the enduring problems ki media, how does a normal average person sitting at his home going to a regular 9 to 5 job where he's not a media person, he does not understand the intricacies ki media kaise kaam karta hai, propaganda kaise बनता है, propaganda से kaise propagate hota hai.
Yeah.
So how does he fight these issues? आजकल के जमाने में तो as you said कि मतलब in the last 10 years Twitter है, यहाँ पे you can cross verify और सब people will you know will come to you and say कि नहीं ऐसा नहीं है वैसा है. पहले ऐसा होता होगा but पहले तो और भी पता नहीं था करने का.
नहीं, what I'm saying is previously there was a vast distinction between an editorial page, an opinion page, and news. Now, now the walls have collapsed. Yep. Now there is no more editorial or news. Everything is an opinion. So whatever opinion you want to observe it as news, you can take it. Remaining is everything is opinion.
Yeah. Off late, there's this very strange tendency that's turned up. And I think part of it is also driven by the fact that the nature in which people consume news today has changed. And I'll give you what I'm trying to say. As a viewer of news channels, if I want to outrage on something, I will switch on to a relevant news channel. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what. No.
आज मेरे को बीजेपी को गाली देना है, चलो एनडीटीवी लगाते
हैं.
आज मुझे कांग्रेस और सबको गाली देना है, चलो रिपब्लिक लगाते हैं. You see what I'm trying to say? It's almost become like a mall where everybody is selling wares of their
हर आपके चैनल मूड के हिसाब से हैं, जिस जैसा आपका मूड उस टाइम पे you can switch on to.
आपको शांति से न्यूज़ देखनी है, आप डीडी न्यूज़ देखोगे. आपको चिल्लम चिल्ली देखनी है, आप आज तक देखोगे.
बिल्कुल.
Right. No, honestly, when I was in Dubai, when I used to come back from work, when the Republic had just started, I used to switch on because there it is here 9 o'clock debate, there it is 7:30. 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, 1.5 hours different. I used to put it on, the house was filled with people. You never felt lonely for 1.5 hours. You know? till you go to sleep, there is someone always shouting.
Someone, there are like multiple people shouting at the same time over each other.
अल्टीमेट तो ये हो गया है कि एक स्क्रीन पे 15 लोग भी होते हैं कभी कभी.
हाँ, अरे मतलब स्क्रीन में और भी जगह ही नहीं बचती. There are like windows barely visible, but they're like
tiny stamp size figures on TV. किसी का क्या हो रहा है पता नहीं चल रहा.
I mean, and debates have become so pathetic. I mean, there is no discussion on economy. This mullah said, there is one video of one mullah going hangs and hammer and tongs on a female BJP karyakarta or someone in some debate. I mean,
we had India TV doing this show, a debate between Muslim scholars supposedly and ex-Muslims, and they got a lot of people, ulema, Maulana types, and the students of madrasas as audience, predominantly the audience. Yahan Noida mein. Guess what would have happened in the show? Why did they do it in the first place then? और ऊपर से I remember listening. I had not seen it till I saw about it. I saw somebody called Tufail Chaturvedi talk about it on some show. He said बदतमीजी हो रही थी literally audience. So you see what I'm trying to say? It's just, why are you trying to become provocateurs unnecessarily? फिर आप लोग रोते हैं कि आपके न्यूज़ चैनल्स पे बोल दिया और आपके ऊपर केस हो रहे हैं. I am not saying you should not discuss important things, but perhaps some things are too important to be discussed by you guys, as in by the media today.
Yeah, true.
Let the alternate space do its job. आप लोग क्यों टांग अड़ा रहे हैं बीच में हर चीज पे?
And the kind of reporting is also sucks. If you can clearly make out which is a right wing report and which is a left wing. Left wing में कुछ facts कुछ नहीं होता. I feel ही होता है. Right wing is ये यजुर्वेद से लेके वो लेटेस्ट वाला कल वाला लिंक इतना. The news piece must be 150 words. The supporting document is 1500. It becomes that way. And still the news is questioned कि तुमने ये लिंक किया.
सबसे पहले तो मुझे ये लगता है कि I don't know about other channels, but sometimes NDTV का कभी वो जो ट्विटर पे या कभी वीडियो दिखता है तो they label their panelists as so suppose somebody is a lawyer, they'll put a bracket close to the advocate part and say sympathizes with BJP or supports BJP. So is a lawyer by profession, probably not a party person, but has a point of view that is aligned with the party. However, shouldn't NDTV itself write in the bracket that we are a Chidambaram channel?
That's what, no, that Rakesh Jhunjhunwala's interview I love.
With that guy, Jain, yeah.
Jain, he tells, yeah, I have a view on politics. I am a private person. You are bloody news. You should be non-biased. And he has no answer.
Yeah. Srinivasan Jain की अपनी कहानी ऐसे कि he and his father basically are anyway छोड़ो यार कभी बहुत लंबी कहानी है
नहीं मतलब शॉर्ट में यही है कि he was I think you know the same story so he was the ambassador to South Africa,
yeah, High Commissioner
and he
South Africa
opposed India's nuclear tests as an ambassador to foreign country, and he I think threatened to complain.
No, the Bugger did not come back, na. When he was
he didn't come back. I think LC Jain ने क्या नाम था
some LC Jain, yeah, you're right.
The Bugger did not come back. He's like, नहीं, I want to enjoy the comforts of South Africa.
Yeah.
But ये जो मतलब जो क्वेश्चन हमने रेज किया है कि प्रोपेगेंडा को फाइट कैसे करे कोई अगर बंदा है मतलब is it a possibility for an individual who has no recourse or does not understand how media works, can he ever like wheat from chaff type का चीज कभी कर सकता है, दूध का दूध पानी का पानी कर सकता है ना. I remember this so it somewhere it was explained, I think it was again probably Talib's book, one of the Talib's book, कि पुराने जमाने में जब मास मीडिया नहीं था तो डिसेमिनेशन इंफॉर्मेशन का कैसे होता था. You go to a chowraha, you go to a marketplace, 3-4 people, 8-10 people hang around there, somebody has come from some news from somewhere, so they all gossip, 8-10 people, you hear something, you forward it. Now out of those 8-10 people there would be 2 or 3 who would always say something that is reliable in the sense that turns out to be true, or something has happened which they are reporting. 3-4 other people would be something that has happened, but they've colored it, they've said it in a way that is not entirely accurate, and then obviously there would be also people who have completely made things up.
Little masala to chahiye, then only you listen.
So mass media is not different from what that मतलब टपरी जो पान की टपरी मान लो आज के सिगरेट की टपरी पहले तो काफी भीड़ होती थी ये जो भी. Now his point was that in the olden in those times this would get filtered out eventually, because people who are there, 10 people, they'll start getting identified, people who are reporting proper facts about an event, because people know over a period of time, it doesn't happen overnight. Over a course of a year, 2 years, they realize this guy, when he's saying something, he knows what he's saying and he's not coloring anything. Then the colored guys will also get identified, and people who are taking information from these start factoring that in their own way. So this is how society was structured. This is how human beings who sometimes seem dumb and completely helpless to the onslaught of media propaganda, they are not. We have to maybe show more confidence in our own evolution, because we are not immune. I mean, we are not, mass media might have come with TV and print 200-300 years ago. But over the course of our evolution, civilization, we have dealt with some or the other form of mass media. And we've also developed mechanism to filter out propaganda versus the truth. So hopefully, eventually, we will also do it in this day and age, despite the overwhelming power of mass media. It's one thing.
I think, Sumit, it is happening at some level already. Okay. If you think about it, I mean, if you see.
Rohit just told now, depending on his mood, he changes the channel.
Yeah, it happens, right?
So it's an entertainment.
Well, I stopped watching news generally because I got nauseous of all of them at large. But yeah, this is something that a lot of people have said to me, like in half jest as well. But they basically were pointing out to how things have literally become these days. But yeah, what I was trying to say was that if you look at that levels, if today there was a poll done right now, a snap poll, not amongst us, but of people, on how much they trust the mainstream media in terms of its news content, chances are high that the number of people actually believing in the news would be very, very low.
Absolutely.
No, that is your opinion.
In India, and I'm not even talking of any place outside.
No. I would disagree with that, because the villages, I mean, whichever channel they are fighting, the news channels are not fighting in the cities. the news channels are fighting. The real fight is happening in the villages on the regional languages.
वो भी है.
हाँ,
true.
so this
But
what,
I mean, point
but
is
ऐसा
that
नहीं है कि
after a
villages
point,
में
all of them
people are
themselves.
Yeah, villages where people are completely helpless, and as I said, they also have their own ways of figuring out कि अगर हम चार newspaper चार चीज बता रही है या अलग-अलग different ढंग से बता रही है, which one to take seriously, which one has the history of doing this or not.
You know how there is this joke which goes around in Kerala that based on the newspaper subscription, you know which party is going to win, because if the subscription of Manorama goes up, that means people are consuming more Congress.
Okay,
if the number of subscriptions of Desha Bhavani, which is the Communist Party's mouthpiece, goes up, that means there is an increased support or increased consumption of news of the communist. So this is happening in the villages. There is no option of, and newspapers are sold mainly there. You know, people sit, they have time to sit and read. So based on
Kerala mein people also have time to sit and read because unemployment levels are through the roof. ठीक है, वो अलग कहानी. Sorry.
No, but they can see. I mean, they make their own choices about
exactly.
Reflected in the media,
exactly.
paper subscription. But they are not just beholden to कि अगर मनोरमा ने खतरनाक propaganda कर दिया तो हम हमेशा मनोरमा को ही मानेंगे.
Exactly.
Supporting Congress and CPM will never come to power. They keep alternating these parties, right? So they are making their choices, however flawed it may be, but it's not like they're helpless. They're making their own things. They have their own system.
No, I'm just saying there are indices which we don't factor in, which these local parties or local
see, they've figured it out to a level, which is why print media की sanctity आज भी कहीं ना कहीं बनी हुई है. Right. Despite, and unfortunately or fortunately, that has also eroded very heavily in recent times.
It has.
Yes. If you look at the number of people who are sourcing the news from YouTube, WhatsApp messages, Facebook posts, Instagram, that tells you what's going on.
This is what
and
I'm
वो
saying.
number छोटा नहीं है, and it's not people like you, me, Harish doing it. Sumit, if you agree, if you know what I'm saying.
I understand.
Those are audiences जो literally रिक्शा चला रही है दिल्ली में. या वो बरेली में कहीं ठेले पे खड़ा है.
Or even kids who are too young to form an opinion.
Kids तो don't even watch news channels. वो सब YouTube से अपनी news information pick कर रहे हैं आज की डेट में. ये fact है. Teenagers कोई नहीं देख रहा news channels. वो JNU में जो वो fossils लेके आते हैं, JNU के fossil जो NDTV के debates में लेके आते हैं ना बिठाने के लिए, big fight and we the people में, those are not representative of what's going on with the trends.
NDTV was only probably watched by like 0.00002% of the
basically the bureaucrats of this country. जितने number है वही देखते हैं.
Number of money, they are not run by viewership or ads.
Exactly.
It is an employment exchange for people,
children of bureaucrats basically.
But the point is, given how bad or propagandist the general mainstream media is it so much bad that the new generation or rickshaw wala, thela wala is consuming YouTube information?
See, I guess that's not the entire story.
But there is a good chance. I mean, opinions.
It will be part of the story, as I agree. Yeah, good chance hai. But it's not the full story from what I understand. I think it's also got to do with the fact the way the media. I mean, people don't want shouting matches essentially.
Yeah.
Or they don't want like absolute.
No, that depends on your age. Old people don't want shouting matches. They don't.
Please, मेरे घर में मेरे पापा मम्मी देखते हैं Republic. उनको चाहिए. छोड़ दो, please. Let's not get into.
Times now, they don't watch Times now. I mean, once you introduce.
नहीं, वो भी देखते हैं, वो switch मारते रहते हैं. तो Times now का हिंदी वाला देखते हैं, क्योंकि वहाँ पे ज़्यादा चिल्लम चिल्ली होती है.
वो नाविका कुमार है बोलती है तो then it becomes a shouting.
By the way, Arnab had called Navika Kumar Kachra Kumar in a WhatsApp message, it seems.
Okay. जैसे नेहरू के टाइम पे उसको प्रोपेगेंडा करके, although मतलब many books or scholarship on Nehru suggest that he had no special place in his heart for children, but he became Chacha Nehru and whatever not, and November. They couldn't do that with Rahul Gandhi in the current times because of the multiplicity of exactly. You don't have the control over media.
Exactly. That's
more
where the
YouTube
difference
channels,
is.
more this and that. So what I'm saying is ki I don't think anybody knows whether this is what we have currently, the ecosystem of consuming information, mainstream media से लेके YouTube से लेके सारा कुछ is better or worse than what was 50 years ago. I'm not sure it is. I can't.
The one thing I believe we can be sure of is that there is this unquantifiable but massive pressure today on mainstream media to either evolve or perish.
Yeah.
It has to adapt to the times in some way for sure.
Mm.
I remember we all of us had a colleague who actually said this once to us in, like, he was discussing it many years ago when I just joined that place.
Mm.
He had said this very publicly in the office. He said, mainstream media will die. Forget it. It will die a very painful death. And it's because of all the shenanigans that have happened in the past decade and a half, not just in India, mind you, he said, globally, that nobody trusts the media today.
Only people media to be trusted is Chinese. they don't allow any news to come in or any news to go out. It's always
the fun part is even the Chinese people don't trust their own media propaganda. You know that, right?
Yeah, I'm sure.
They'll tell you that in private, never in public.
So that's the gold
It'll be
standard.
very interesting to find out कि मतलब Chinese public क्या सोचती है. Do they, for example, मुझे बहुत दिन पहले कोई दुबई से मिला था, some journalist at some junket. He said कि भाई, why do I need democracy? I mean, कुछ बात हो रही थी. I'm just मतलब just excerpt of what we were talking about. We have security, we have money, we have a job, everything else is fine. I don't want to raise my voice against government.
Yeah.
I don't want to crib about कि भाई मुझे ये बोलने दो, वो बोलने दो. I don't want to do this. So it would be wonderful to, as in it would be intriguing and almost instructive to understand कि Chinese people भी क्या ही समझते हैं कि I don't care, this government has delivered us higher income.
Yeah.
हम लोग more prosperous हैं. We don't care if we can't say this and that on Baidu and we don't have Twitter and Google. As long as we keep getting prosperous, we don't. Do they understand that, or do they actually buy in the state government controlled media's propaganda that China is the
by now for sure. I mean, in the initial days, okay. I mean, by now even they know that we don't get news from outside. Yeah.
But you know what? It's a very complex question. Maybe we should do a more detailed discussion on how. I mean, I know people are, saying that, and I think it was Benjamin Disraeli who said this, or Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst form of government, but it is a lot better than many other forms.
Yeah, it's the best we have. Yeah, exactly. देखो ऐसा मतलब कोई perfect तो है नहीं हमारा ये.
And I get where that man comes from, because when you have a certain social contract in place, and by and large most people don't want to break that mold either. For them, just having a good life in itself is a very big achievement, and they want to stay with that.
True.
So when you have that situation, why would you want to unnecessarily break the norm? And I completely get for that reason where it comes from. If I can be, and mind you, it is many people think that us, like the kingdoms, the Arab kingdoms, or the Sheikdoms, or the Chinese CCP systems, or the Vietnamese system also is immune to public sentiment and criticism. It is not.
Yeah, I'm
they
sure.
actually are eventually forced to respond to public criticism.
Even
our in-house Middle East correspondent will give us.
Yeah. Even kings, I mean sheikhs.
Yeah, exactly.
Even the sheikhs listen to the people. I mean, the moment the Arab Spring, once the Arab Spring happened in Egypt, Saudi and UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, everyone went into safety mode. They just went, berserk with all the welfare schemes. तुम्हें घर चाहिए, 2 ले लो, 1 नहीं, 2 ले लो, 1 बीवी क्यों? Why 1 wife? Take 3 wives. They went into that spree to make sure that the people are happy. You are paying 10 dirhams for electricity. Let me get you an expert and work for you. Let him generate 10 kilowatt of energy for you. it became like that.
See, that's where probably you bring a very important point. People, यार बहुत लोग को पता है कि पॉलिटिक्स करने से हमारे घर की रोटी नहीं आने वाली.
See, it's
Right.
not about
They're
politics.
more concerned about the state of the drain outside their house and whether they are going to get power supply uninterrupted than who's going to be the next prime minister, who's going to be the next finance minister. I'm just saying, I'm not discounting democracy. I mean,
No,
it's
there,
something
but
people don't realize. I remember somebody saying this on a news channel many years back about election forecasting के time पे बड़ी interesting बात हुई थी. Why did Benazir Bhutto lose in Pakistan in popular elections, despite her being seen as a charismatic leader, ye wo duniya jahan, to a Nawaz Sharif who certainly had no charisma then or now? And somebody said a very fascinating thing in that analysis. He said, you know, Benazir Bhutto jahan jati thi, Kashmir, 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 Kashmir hoti thi. Nawaz Sharif bolta tha, bijli sadak pani. People छोड़ के हमें बिजली सड़क पानी से ज्यादा मतलब है कश्मीर के मुकाबले.
Even India understood, na? They stopped. Now you don't hear BJP talking about Pakistan. They are talking about development. Pre-election it was Balakot, Pakistan, Kashmir.
To their credit,
They will deal with it
full stop on
accordingly.
Pakistan. Ki, bhai, if they hit us, we'll hit them back 10 times harder. So that's it.
And that's been done and dusted in a way. Yeah.
So no, I mean they don't. Right now, the current government is no longer saying anything on Pakistan or kuch bhi nahi. I mean, you don't hear Pakistan in news.
That radio silence is welcome, trust me. Because our real enemies are on the eastern front and not necessarily on the western front. What we have on the western front is a nuisance.
Yeah, even if they're the enemies, unless you're doing something about it, just talking about all the time incessantly,
Exactly.
will immediately get the public completely bored. They'll start thinking कि यार सिर्फ नाम लेने के लिए मतलब public sentiment को exploit करने के लिए बोल रहा है. तो अगर तुमको problem तो कुछ करते क्यों नहीं हो? They've done it and they've stopped talking about it altogether. कि ठीक है, don't worry, we're taking care of it, and that's the welcome move to be.
But yeah, we should pick this thread up someday about I mean whole list whether democracies are overrated.
Yeah.
And I mean I'll bring in some very interesting aspects probably from an Indic perspective, because I'd once written this very popular piece about democracy traditions in ancient India, and maybe we can also
and whether a kind benevolent Raja who cares about Praja is a better system to follow rather than
and I mean basically see what works out, whether eventually, and maybe why, I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying democracy is great, but probably in a country as bizarre as India,
it is
for a want of better word, it's the only thing that works.
Again, it falls into information.
Yeah, agree.
No, basis of democracy is information. If you stop the information, I mean, we can see. I don't know why our government is not doing anything.
That's the biggest weakness of democracy as well, right? People can plant information. So that's what the Chinese do with every country, isn't it?
Yeah. In fact,
they actually use the mouthpiece of its unofficial consulate in Chennai to publish so much stuff.
True.
In fact, what
they should be called the sickle, not the Hindu.
The sickle and the hammer. But वो है कि मतलब democracy भी हो तो all democracy around the world should prepare a charter कि okay, we are democracies. When we deal with each other, we will have a particular set of rules. However, when we are dealing with a country like a communist country like China, we will be on reciprocal basis. कि तुम अगर हमारे साथ ये करते हो, हम भी तुम्हारे. You will not enjoy the fruits of free society and democracy when you come to our country, and then
a peaceful world.
Well, it's very difficult to live by that, honestly. But yeah, I get what you're coming from.
A peaceful world will deny us the world this podcast will. We'll have nothing to speak about. Everyone will be
true.
Yeah. And on that note, we can hope we are not praying for world peace.
True. No, but yeah, we should pick this thread sometime in one of our future podcasts.
Yeah. So with that, we call it a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us. Whichpodcast9@gmail.com is our email where you can always reach us whenever you want to. Our Twitter handle @drinksfries, capital D, capital F. Uh, you can always follow us, check out more stuff on it. We also try to put up more interesting news once in a while. So to see what we are thinking and what goes on our minds as well. Facebook page by the name Friends, Drinks and Fries is another place where you might want to follow us if you are interested. And yeah, have a great weekend from here. This has been a slightly delayed episode in the making. So apologies for that because I know a few people have been pinging me on what we want to talk about. So
It's nice to know that people
yeah, I know,
are.
I know, but yeah, I mean they're very keen on listening to us, and yeah, I
Yeah,
mean
we are good noises in the background. In for all
White
the
noise.
for all the lonely people who come back.
yeah, I know, but we are not as loud as Arnab Goswami for sure. So please, you can forgive us for that, or probably commend us for that, whatever you feel like. We don't necessarily fill background noises that loudly as we do, and doesn't make you feel like you're living in a joint family for sure. So yeah, but yeah, do drop in a line if you feel like you want us to know something, or you want us to probably talk about something as well. And yeah, have a great weekend ahead, folks. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
weekend, everyone. See you next week. Bye.